Welcome. It's Gitanjali here from High Definition U, and I am very pleased this week to be introducing Bruce Swales on our podcast. Bruce is an incredibly experienced leader. He started 40 years ago. We won't mention number of years again, but that amount of experience that Bruce brings is incredible. And it's one of the reasons that he's known in the industry as someone that can be relied upon to really grow teams. And that's really his sweet spot, is starting in a company. And it was, I think, 11 years ago that Bruce started at what was then LWG in very much of a startup capacity. He was sharing with me before we started recording that there was 60 employees at the time. 58 of them were in the US, and then it was him in Singapore and one person in London. But actually that energy of taking something from nothing and growing it and shaping it into something that he can be proud of, and then as a company they can be proud of, is something that he's known for in the industry, and certainly something that he thrives on personally. He has taken a lot of risks in his career, starting way back. We're going to share some stories about when he first started in the industry and some of those risks that he took. Today's theme is all about acting with courage. And I'm very, very proud to introduce to you Bruce Swales on the topic of courage. But firstly, Bruce, welcome. Can you tell me, I have a 7-year-old, and he's always intrigued in terms of what people do in the world. If you were to describe to him what you do in the world, how would you describe it to a 7-year-old?
Oh, great question to start the interview. I would say I help to solve problems for other people, to help them understand why something happened, how it happened, and what the consequences were. And I'm hoping that as young people are naturally inquisitive, they will appreciate and understand that.
I love that. So you're a problem solver ultimately, and he would love that, I'm sure. What is it that you love about that you do in the world, problem solving?
Well, I like challenges, and I like to see people happy at the end of the day. So I like solving other people's problems as well as my own, of course.
Of course, got to start at home. And as I said, you've been in this industry for many decades now, or several different industries, but with a theme. When you look back on your career and you think about some of the things that you've done, and you think about some of the people that you've met, what's something, might be personally, might be professionally, that someone might misunderstand about you, Bruce?
Probably that I can look like I come across as too confident or overconfident. Mm-hmm. When in actuality, I think it's simply me having the courage to attempt to do something challenging.
So actually there's a sense of you've got all of this experience and actually you're really, really confident, but that's not necessarily the case. And I rant often about the C word of confident, because I do feel like that's not where the conversation is, and that's not actually where our power lies. And obviously one of the things that is the C word that is going to make the difference is certainly curiosity, is where it starts, and then courage second to that. So what does that actually mean to you? It can be a bit of a nebulous idea. What does acting with courage actually mean to you, Bruce?
I think to me it means not being afraid to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, but in conjunction with that, knowing your limits. And to me, I think the saying "thrown in the deep end" comes to mind, and it's something that I've never actually shied away from.
Can you tell me about a time when you really got thrown in the deep end and you jumped actually, and you decided to take a risk, and how that worked out?
The most memorable is when I was 24, I think it was. I'd been working for about 2 or 3 years in New Zealand. I'd never traveled outside of New Zealand, and I was given the opportunity, and I looked at it as an opportunity. Some people would have looked at it as a huge challenge or something they wouldn't want to have got involved with. And that was an opportunity to travel all the way up to Indonesia, which was very much a developing country at that time, and go offshore and commission a system that I was involved with designing in New Zealand at an offshore oil field.
So you were on the oil field. You were on the oil field offshore. That's where you were staying and working.
Yes, yes. Well, I was living on a construction barge tied alongside one of the offshore oil platforms because the oil field was still under construction. So I had never been outside New Zealand before. I'd never carried out any work in the oil industry before. I'd certainly never been offshore on an oil field before. Um, but I looked at it as a huge opportunity, as certainly as a challenge, and it was a little bit daunting. But by far, it was a huge opportunity.
And when you said before about courage being a combination of understanding your limits, but also going outside of your comfort zone, how did that relate in that situation? Did you reach kind of a comfort zone and you thought, okay, I'm jumping out of it? How did you act with courage in that moment? How did you decide?
There were certainly times that I felt outside of my comfort zone for sure. But one of the things I knew was that back in that particular example, back in New Zealand, there was a great team behind me. I am very comfortable, so to speak, jumping outside my comfort zone if I know that there's a good support team behind me.
I love that actually as a key element of being able to act with courage is creating, and we'll talk about this on another podcast around community, of building that sense of community around you. So it's much easier to leap out of a plane, which I have done, although attached to someone else. It makes it a lot easier, right? In that kind of skydiving way. Have you done a skydive, Bruce?
No, I don't actually.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Never had the opportunity, but if I did, I possibly would. Yeah.
And then not knowing, I guess, at that time if it would pan out or not, because as you said, there was an opportunity there and some people would have shied away from it and you jumped in, knowing that you had a team behind you, but not knowing. And that's, for me, a key element of courage as well. It's not knowing actually what's going to happen, but having the courage to take action in the face of that, right?
Right, yes.
And when you think about how your ideas around courage have been shaped, can you tell me about someone or more than one person that's maybe shaped the way that you have started or have always believed about courage?
Probably if you ask that question of half of the New Zealand population, you get the same answer. For me, being in New Zealand, it has to be Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the Sherpa, as I'm sure you know, was the first person to climb Mount Everest in, I think, probably early 1950s. And to me, given the lack of good climbing equipment in those days and the lack of support systems back then, that must have taken immense courage to do something like that.
And taking that risk, as we said before, and not knowing how it would pan out. When you look over the people that have been in leadership positions over the many decades that you have been growing your career, was there anyone where you thought, okay, yes, they as a leader, because oftentimes we don't really think about courage as a leadership quality necessarily. Is there someone you can think about through your experience that really embodied that sense of acting with courage, or an example of when they did?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the story I was just talking about regarding traveling to Indonesia and working on an offshore oil field, my boss at the time, that was the sort of thing that he would do and had done. What encouraged me what was just that this is something that he would have done, and that he actually had confidence in me to be able to do the same thing. So for sure.
It was actually seeing him role model it, right, in terms of that. Yeah. And when you think about your career, there's obviously been times when you have been courageous and acting with courage, and that's an example at the tender age of 24, having never left New Zealand, going to Indonesia, which I think panned out for you, didn't it, on a personal level?
It did indeed. My wife is from Indonesia. Yes.
So you never know, right, professionally or personally, where things are going to go. But when is there a time that maybe you wish, and, we're not in the business of regrets here at High Definition U, but upon reflection, is there a time in your career where you wish that you had been more courageous? And what would that have looked like?
Yeah, for sure. early on in my career, I was quite introverted, and when it came to public speaking in front of large groups, I was quite fearful of that, as I guess a lot of people are. But certainly it was a big challenge for me in the early part of my career, and clearly I would like to have been more courageous at that point.
Mm-hmm. And what would that have looked like then? Because again, we can mix that up with confident, like, oh, if I'd just been more confident and done those, presentations or public speaking. What do you think the action would have been that you could have taken to be more courageous in that example?
I think just the realization that came to me a few years later when I overcame my fear of public speaking, and that is that, we're all more or less the same. If I could see other people, day-to-day people, giving presentations or speeches in front of people, and I thought, well, if they can do it, there's no reason why I can't do it.
Interesting.
An epiphany for me, I guess. I woke up one morning about 2 weeks away from giving my first presentation at a conference in Asia, actually, and it just dawned on me that if others can do it, there's no reason why I can't do it.
Wow. So it was really, we talk a lot at High Definition about mindset and methodology. And this was really a mindset shift that happened, as you say, an epiphany. And it's interesting because, again, it was looking outside of yourself. You said in the first instance, the leader, when you went to Indonesia, had shown courage. So there was a role modeling. And again, in this situation, it was like, oh, well, actually, if other people are doing it, then I can do it as well. So looking to others to activate that, well, encourage you to have courage seems to be something that is has worked for you and obviously can work for other people. When you think about your leadership, so that's a great example, and definitely lots of people, are not full of courage, not confidence when it comes to public speaking. But when you think about your leadership, how does courage feature tangibly in terms of your leadership? You're managing director out there now in Asia. You've got a growing team in Australia. You've been in Asia for a long time now. How has courage featured in that leadership?
I think if I look at my current role with the company, I think by encouraging our consultants to have a yes we can or a yes I can attitude, particularly in regard to our clients who may have a difficult case for us to investigate. But while understanding their limitations and knowing where to get support if needed.
Okay, so again, that idea of understanding the limitations but getting the support, so that team behind you, as you said, that gave you the courage to actually move to Indonesia, is crucially important. I wonder what the biggest challenge is now in your role, and how might courage actually help you to overcome it?
Good question. Probably the biggest challenge right now is the impact that COVID-19 travel restrictions continue to have on our business in Asia here. It's a huge issue. I'm not actually sure courage will actually help a lot in that regard, though, as everything is so much out of our control as individuals. Perhaps belief would be more appropriate. Belief in the government, belief in the medical profession and humanity as a whole to do the right thing.
That's nice. Yeah, I think there is a sense of, and Mandela said it well, in the great words of the great man himself, that courage is not the absence of fear. We can't take out the fear, whether it's about a virus or a call, if we're the consultant with a client, but it's not the absence of fear. It's the triumph over fear, right? And to which I say, what were you going to say, Bruce?
I was just going to say, I think that's quite appropriate in this case. Yeah, I mean, along with what I just said, that there is a degree of fear I have that, how long will this last? What impact will it have long term on our business, on myself and my family personally as well, of course. But having the courage to be able to move forward and accept that things will get better at some point.
I think there's a sense of letting go at the same time that goes with that acceptance. And you mentioned the word control. Actually, it's outside of our control. What's your thoughts around that? Actually, that courage is associated with a sense of letting go and acceptance, as well as potentially appetite for risk.
Yeah, well, I think having the courage in the absence of control, either your control of the situation or someone else's control of what's happening, having courage to remain confident, to be able to proceed and work through whatever issues come up because of that, I think.
And I think sometimes courage can be associated with, big events like, war, and, there's medals that we give for acts of courage. And then there's people that run into burning buildings, not firemen or firewomen that, save babies from that kind of situation. And we can get very, those feel like obvious examples of courage, right? And that idea of overcoming the fear. Of course, they're fearful, the life-threatening examples. Maybe, picking up the phone to a new client isn't quite as life-threatening, but in terms of our brain, which, as you know, I am completely obsessed with, it's going to go into a similar state of, is this something that I want to do, right? And then that's where we have the opportunity to activate our courage, not to wait till we feel confident, but to activate our courage. Because, as I said before, Mandela is very eloquent, but actually, how do you triumph over fear? How do you tangibly act with courage, right? And we've talked a little bit about that, of really understanding who is around you. And then there's that piece of actually what might be ahead, but not knowing what might be ahead. I feel like there's a real equation. We love a good equation in many industries, particularly around the engineering brain. But that equation of kind of what's the risk versus the reward, which equates a little bit to that idea of comfort zone and control. How do you think that ties in? Can you give us an example, Bruce, of when courage has been associated with kind of taking a risk for you, and how you actually activated it then?
There's probably lots of examples, but I'm struggling to find one. I've mentioned in discussions with you, I've been involved with a number of startup companies, particularly in Asia here, and courage to have the courage to do things, to make decisions.
I like that in terms of the decision making, actually, about making the decision and knowing that whatever happens from there, you get to make another decision. Because oftentimes we get held in that space of fear of, what if it's the wrong decision? What if it doesn't pan out? What if we spend that money in the business? What if we get the wrong resource? What if the client doesn't like that product? And that holds us in that space of fear. But actually, in that moment, the courage to make a decision, so actually decision making as an element of this kind of nebulous idea of courage, is a really interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely. Having the courage to make a decision, knowing that ultimately that may not be the right decision, or the ultimate decision is often better than not doing anything.
I couldn't agree with you more. The non-decision, right? Not making a decision is still a decision. And actually, this is really important from a leadership perspective. This is why I love to talk about courage in terms of a leadership quality, because what you're doing in that moment is actually leaving people in a state of uncertainty. And fear loves to exist in uncertainty, and fear loves to exist in isolation. Right, which is where that idea of actually, if I surround myself with other people or I look to role models, then the fear dissipates. Otherwise, when you're sitting at home thinking and often overthinking a decision or a situation or something, a public talk that's coming up, fear thrives on that isolation. So actually making the decision and or having conversations with other people as a tangible part of courage is really important.
Yeah, I think so.
So let's play a little time travel game, Bruce. If you were to get in a time machine and give your younger self 2 tips for being more courageous, what would you say to yourself?
Okay, 2. All right, it's a cliche, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. That's something I live my life by, I think. And associated with that is don't be afraid to take risks in life.
I love that. I love that. I mean, as you know, this is why it sits in the background, is be more curious than afraid. So don't be afraid to take risks. That is fantastic. So some tangible things there around courage, around leadership, around what that looks like, whether you're at the start of your career or many decades in a profound position of leadership from Bruce. Now to the lightning round, Bruce. Are you ready, my friend?
I guess so. Go for it.
Are you ready to take a risk and act with courage in the lightning round? Okay, here we go. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, can.
Can, I love it. What's your least favorite word?
The opposite, cannot.
Cannot. What is your go-to takeout order?
That would be pizza from a local Italian restaurant just around the corner from where we live, for sure.
Nice. Yeah. What are the toppings? What's your flavor?
Just simple pizza with salami and cheese and tomato.
Keeping it simple. And if you could recommend a book or a TED Talk that, oh my golly goodness, if everyone could read or watch, what would it be?
It would be a book. The title is An Amazing Life, Sir Peter Blake. And it's actually a biography and a great story of triumph and tragedy. Peter Blake was one of the world's best and most successful yachtsmen in New Zealand, with many racing victories and a number of world circumnavigations under his belt, who was gunned down in the prime of his life in the senseless murder in the Amazon jungle. So it's a biography, as I say. It's a true story. It's such a great story of adventure, drama, and courage. So yeah, if you like that sort of book, and even better if you like the sea and sailing, then it's a great book to read.
Amazing recommendation. Are you a sailor, as a separate question? Is that something that you love, Bruce?
I used to be, yes. From my teens up until I was in my mid-30s. Yeah, it was
really?
my main as a young person, yeah.
Wow. So what kind of sailing did you do?
Initially, it was small boat sailing. I sailed at the time it was an Olympic class tornado catamaran. And then after I got married, I sailed on a much larger, or crewed on a much larger yacht owned by a friend of ours. So,
oh my goodness.
About 35 when we moved to Singapore and gave that up.
Wow. And I know you've got 2 grown boys. Did they pick up that love of sailing?
No, they didn't, unfortunately.
They have their own passions. I'm not going to go down the segue of America's Cup as an Australian, but I do remember fierce battles between the Kiwis and the Aussies at the America's Cup.
Yeah.
Was that a dream, maybe, Bruce, that one day you would be sailing in the America's Cup?
It was a dream when I was younger to at least be part of an America's Cup team, yeah. Not necessarily on the boat, but somehow working as part of the team, yeah, for sure.
We'll never say never. Who knows? Who knows what the future will hold? All right, back to the lightning round. So a wonderful recommendation from the book. I'm adding that to my long list of books that I want to read. If you had one superpower, Bruce, what would it be?
Okay, I think it would be to be able to instantly teleport myself anywhere in the world, because I certainly enjoy travel, but I dislike spending time in planes and in airports.
So if you could teleport yourself to one place right now, where would it be?
Good question. Barcelona, Spain.
Oh, lovely. So you can see a bit of Gaudi's work.
Yeah, and that came to mind because exactly this time 3 years ago, we were in Barcelona, Spain on holiday.
Lovely. Well, let me know when you have that superpower in place. Now, what sound or noise do you love?
Unsurprisingly, the sound of the sea. as it played such a major role in my earlier life.
I love that. And there's a smell to the sea as well, isn't it, that I absolutely love. You have been doing what you do for many decades now, my friend, but what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think at my age now, none, but given my life again, if I look at it that way, probably being an orthopedic surgeon, which may sound strange, I know, but I've had a number of orthopedic surgeries over the years, and I've been fascinated by the degree of engineering and biomechanics involved in those surgeries. So given my engineering or technical background, it's a career or profession that's fascinated me and continues to.
Amazing. I was sure there was going to be something about sailing. That is a wonderful surprise, although born out of some painful experiences by the sounds of it. So the final question, Bruce, is if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be?
It would be free ice cream for everyone. Come on, we all love ice cream, right? It brings a smile to everyone's face.
It does indeed. I love ice cream. What a wonderful way to end. Thank you for your time today, Bruce, and all of your inspirational advice around how to act with courage. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Off to have a bowl of ice cream now.